In this Godot tutorial, we'll make the skill tree that we have created in the last episode fully functional. Within that functionality is included a reference table so that the script that we're making is fully flexible and can handle any kind of skill tree, however big that you throw at it. Also, we'll include player level as a requirement to opening up or unlocking certain skills. Let's get started. The first thing we'll work on is opening up and loading the skill tree. To do that, the code needs a standard starting position or starting state that it always knows it's going to be in. So we'll define that as making sure that all the buttons are disabled and all the connectors are not connected or are empty. So I've already done that for most of the skill tree. What I've basically done, I've selected all the connectors in the connector container and I've set the value back to 0, basically making the bar empty. And under the skill tree, I've selected every single skill, and in the skill container, I've approached the texture button and I've turned disabled on. Now all our skills are disabled, all our connectors are empty, so we can start putting in some code. So for the code, I've already prepared a little bit of a template for us. So going over to the script, don't be disheartened by all the code you see here. Most of this, or pretty much everything of this, is part of our stats tutorial to create a stat system. I've only added 3 lines of code basically. That is the load skills function call here under the ready function. And that function is opened up right here with only 2 lines of code so far, with some text to help us guide along. Basically, when we load the skills panel, we want to basically answer 2 questions. Which of the texture buttons do we need to enable, and which of the connectors do we have to fill up, either partially or fully? So basically, we're iterating over every skill and we're iterating over every connector, and we're going to ask ourselves in code those questions. We can just dissect that into 2 categories, which are the same for both of these functions. First of all, we have the skills that we have already unlocked. We want the unlocked skills, of course, their pictures to be in color. That means we have to enable the button. Now, once we have the unlocked skills shown or enabled, we also have to, of course, enable the skills that we do not have unlocked yet, but we do meet the requirements for, because we need that button to be pressable. Now we're going to add a little bit of a modulation, a self-modulate, to make sure that it's a little bit grayed out, to make sure that the player can see the difference between an unlocked and a not unlocked skill, but we do have to unlock that button, else the player can never press it. Now for the connectors, we basically ask the same question. For the skills that have already been unlocked, if there is a connector going through or to that skill, we need to show it fully for 100% because the skill has been unlocked, so the path needs to be fully explored. And then of course we have the skills that we meet the requirements for, basically exactly the same like here, and we want to load that bar up halfway, indicating to the player like, hey, you can unlock that skill, you can explore this path in the skill tree, all you got to do is spend some skill points. So that's what we need to do, and as you can see, we iterate over every skill and over every connector by going over get nodes in group skills. Now we don't have these groups yet, so let's quickly make those. So for skills, I'll copy paste this name to make it easy for myself. I'll go into the skill tree and I'll select one of the skills, and actually I'll select the skill container. So I'm not selecting the texture button, I'm selecting the skill container named, in this case, 1A. With that, over here in node groups, I'll put in that skills name, I'll add that group and I'll manage it. And now I have to add every other skill. So we have to add skill 1B. Now 1B has 2 nodes with that name, but we want the texture rectangle. We want the container 1, that's the horizontal box container that has the 1A node, the skill container. So you got to make sure you add the right ones. It's really important. So we want 1B, we have 2A, we have 2B, we have 2C, and of course we have 3A. Now those are our skills, so now all those skills are in their own skills container, and we can, or in their own group I should say, and now we can access all of those nodes through this function. We're going to do exactly the same with the skills connector, so I'll be closing the skill tree and I'll be opening up the skill connectors, and I'll add or approach the first connector, that is 2A to 1A, sorry, to 2A. So also here in the group panel, I'll add the name, I'll add it, I'll manage the group, make sure skill connectors is selected, and we'll go over the same way. Now, of course, we have, what is it, 6 skills, but we only have 4 connectors because we got 2 skills on the button that, of course, are not connected by anything. These are the base skills that you get at level 1. So we need to get the connector for 2B, and that is not 2 to 2B. In this case, it will be 1A to 2B. So you gotta have this one with the texture rectangle icon. Now we'll add that one. We need to connect 2C, so that will be 1B to 2C, and we need to add 3A, and that will be 2C to 3A. Now all our connectors are in a group, and we can start adding some code to these 2 functions. So of course, before we add any functions, we need somewhere to reference, did we unlock the skill already? So what we'll do for now, I got a tutorial coming up in the future where you can save player stats in a more logical place. For now, we'll just add it to the player script. So I just quickly went to the player script, but you can also go to the map scene and to the player and to the actual script. In here, I've created variables. These are called skill, and on 1A to 3A, and I've set with a boolean whether they are unlocked or not. So right now, of course, skill 1A and B, our 2 starter skills, are unlocked, and I've also unlocked skill 2C. So that will be on the right side. I believe Heavenly Light or something like that. Heavenly Strike 2, did we call it? Something like that. So this is what we'll use to reference whether something is unlocked or not. So I've added the script for the first enable skills that have been unlocked already. I've added it right here. And this looks like a lot of code, and it is a lot of code, to make sure that the code is flexible for any kind of skill tree you throw at it. What I'm going to do is, going back to the character sheet, I'll approach one of these containers, these buttons that we're unlocking, so you can follow along what we're doing. So this is the 1A skill button container, and it's this texture button that we need to have. I'm going to copy this node path, and I'll put it in here so you understand what's going on. We need to approach this node path. If the player we get the variable, we need skill underscore, and we need to add 1A to that. Now we have added the nodes in group, and the name of that node, the skill container, is 1A. So we're going to get skill underscore as text, and we add skill get name, so that will be 1A to it. That way we get the variable skill underscore 1A, which of course exists on the player script. The player script we approach by defining the variable player on the top here with get node parent of parent player. That's where our player node is located, our kinematic body with its attached script. Now, with that done, we verify if that is true, if the skill is unlocked, and if that is the case, we need to set disabled false on that texture button. And for skill 1A, that will be this tree. Now, the thing is, for every single skill, the first part of this tree is always going to be the same. It's always the same up till skill tree, but then we need the correct swimming lane, in this case swimming lane layer 1, and the correct skill 1A. Now the end / texture button is of course the same again, of course, for every single skill. So we need to get this 1 / 1A as a flexible part applicable to any kind of skill you throw at it, however big you make your skill tree. So to do that, we're going to get the node, and we first paste in that first part that we know is the same for every single piece. Then we add plus, we get the skill, so that is the skill node reference from the in tree, just like we get skill get name here, we use skill get name there, but now we add a last function, left 1 character. So we take the left side from the left, we count 1 character, and we take that string. Now, of course, this is only a string of 2 characters long, but the left side, number 1, that is number 1. So we retrieve 1 as a text from this function. Then we add a /, and then of course we get the skill name, and that's how we get that 1 / 1A. Then of course we add the texture button, and we set disable to false. So that's how we build up this variable get node reference, or variable node path, and we're going to be doing this a couple of times over in this tutorial to get everything working. So it's good that you spend some more time on this if you didn't get this, because we're going to be using it a lot, and I'm not going to explain it this long every single time. So with that done, we should be unlocking the skills that are unlocked or that are known as unlocked on the player script. For the connectors, we do pretty much exactly the same. We get if player get skill plus the connector get name, because remember the connectors, just like this one is called 1A, also the connectors have a name. So if we quickly go to the connectors and we have, for example, skill 2C, which is opened up, so that is in swimming lane 1A to 2. We have here 2C. So we know that the connector 2C, if we get that name, if that is true, then we know that we need to unlock or open up this texture progress, because this is the texture progress from 1B to 2C. So we set that connector and we set the value to 100. Now if we load this game up and we open the character sheet, you can now see that both our starting skills are opened up, and you can see this last skill is opened up, and the bar that's connecting that path has now connected. So we get a visual representation of what you have invested points in so far, what part of the tree you have explored already. Now we got to make sure that whenever a skill is available to unlock or meets the requirements, that we can also see that visually, and that we fill that path up halfway to give the player that visual incentive, like, hey, you can unlock something here. So let's get working on that. Now, to answer that question in our code, do we meet the requirements for that skill to be unlocked? We need a reference table, because there's no way in the code we can connect skill 1A to skill 2A and 2B. We could, but that would make our whole code not flexible anymore. We couldn't just plug in anything, and you would have to write a lot of code. We want this to be flexible, and for that we need a reference table. So we're gonna have to build some external database that we can reference to determine which skill connects to which other skill. Now, I'm doing that in Google Sheets. If you have followed my tutorials before, I got a whole tutorial how you can quickly compile a JSON format database from Google Sheets. Thereby you can use all the convenience of Google Sheets with validations and colors and whatnot. And then when you compile to JSON, you don't have to write the JSON code, which is very easy to make mistakes in. So what we got here, we got a JSON with a dictionary. That dictionary is going to consist of the skills. So the skills will be the keys. Now each key will have a couple of other keys. They will have these keys: the unlock skill, the cost, and the required player level. That's what we'll be implementing in this tutorial. So for every skill, we reference what is the unlocking skill. So for example, if we take these two skills right here, skill 2A and 2B, both of these are unlocked by skill 1A, this skill right there. They have some cost that we'll program in later, and they have a required player level, level 8 and level 5. Now, of course, we got that for the rest as well. What we do with this is we go to the add-ons, we go to export data, we open the sidebar, we compile this into JSON. If you want to know how to do this, if you've never done it before, I'll put a link down in the description below that has the full tutorial that goes very deep into how to do this and how to get it into Godot. So if this goes way too quick for you, just look at that tutorial, come back here, and you'll get this in no time, and you'll use it a lot, trust me. So with that done, we got our JSON. Now if I go into the data folder here, and I'll just quickly open up this in the file manager. So this is the project of the tutorial. Here I've added the skill tree datasheet 1 JSON. That is the file that I created through the Google Sheet. Now let's quickly open this up. Here you can see we got the skill 1A, and let's get skill 2A and 2B right here. Here you can see how this is a dictionary that consists of another dictionary with other keys. So that's the data we need to reference. Now let's go over the code and how do we use this. So after we have identified which skills have been unlocked by the player get skill or get, and then we get that skill and we check if it's true. Now we're going to do exactly the same, but instead of checking if this skill is unlocked, we need to be checking if the underlying skill is unlocked. So here this skill get name would get 2A and 2B. Here we go into the data, we go into that skill tree data. Then we use the skill get name, so we input that 2A or that 2B into the data tree, and we retrieve the unlock skill. So what we do, we approach 2A or 2B, and we retrieve 1A, or in this case also 1A, and we put that 1A, this whole place here, gets the 1A, it adds the skill underscore on top of it, so it's going to look if that underlying skill is unlocked. Now, if that's true, the next thing we want to do is, of course, check if the player has a high enough level. So that is, well, let's quickly close this one for a moment to not make you crazy. Then we check if the player.level, so that's again a variant or variable on the player script, if that is bigger or equal to, and then again we push that skill get name into our database, but now we retrieve the required player level. So this is going to be either 5 or 8 for skill 2A and 2B, and it's going to check that against the player level. Now the player currently in the game is level 7, so I chose that 8 of course on purpose. You can feel what's coming, right? For the connector, we pretty much do exactly the same. These two variants or two checkers are exactly the same checkers as we have here. So that's exactly the same. Now for the connectors, we simply set the value to 50. That's easy. For the skill textures, what we do is we get exactly the same code that we use to retrieve the node right here. So this is pretty much exactly the same as this. The difference though is that here I use it directly and set disable with dot set disabled false. Here I store it temporarily in a variable texture button, and then I set texture button dot set disabled. So this pretty much does exactly the same. The advantage is that now I can reuse that entire get node to also set the modulate. The set modulate sets the color of the texture or adds color to it. And what I do, I only take 40% of the red, green and blue channels, and I keep 100% of the alpha channel. So I'm not adding any transparency, I'm just making the colors closer to their gray values. Now with that code all in, we can now play the game. We can open up our skill tree, and now you can see that we got a half filled bar towards skill 2B, which is a little bit grayed out. And here you can see this skill is also unlockable and is also half grayed out, but skill 2A is not unlockable because skill 2A of course requires player level 8. Now as I said, we're currently player level 7 and we're pretty much to level 8. So let's get away from the code for a moment. Let's kill some skeletons. Hey, we're level 8. Now if we open the skill tree, you can see the skill or the code has recognized that we're now level 8, and now suddenly this skill is unlockable. So now that we got the skill tree loaded in, now we need to make sure that we can actually press some buttons and spend some skill points to unlock the entire tree. So let's get cracking on that. So let's first set up our project, because before we can spend any skill points, we first need to have skill points. And yes, we do have 3 points here, but that's just text in a label. That's not in the code. So let's start from the beginning. Let's start with the player script. On the player script, I've added, just like we added stat points to the player script, right here I've also added skill points. So I've gave the player 9 skill points. So that 3 that we see in the menu all the time, that should be changing into a 9 now. So that will be a good way to check if things are going the way we want it to. Also under the level function, when the player levels up, I've added that the 4 skill points will be added to whatever the amount of skill points the player currently has. Now, next thing we need to do is make sure that that number 9, or if we level up 13, gets updated in the label so that the player can see how much skill points he actually has. Just like we did with the stat system, I have defined the node skill points as the label on the top of the script here. So we always have easy access to it. And then, just like I did for the stat points that is available to the player, I've now added the skill points, and we set that as the text string player skill points. So we simply reference that skill points in the player script, and we turn that into a string because of course that's an integer, and a label doesn't accept an integer as a variant type. Now I'm also adding /n points. This /n means enter. So basically it means that the number is going to be on the first line and points will be on the second line, just as we designed the skill tree in the first part of this tutorial. So now that we have that, we need to make sure that we can actually press some of these buttons. Now to do that, I'm going to be making use of exactly the same sort of function as we have used for the stat system for the minus and plus buttons to increase your stats. So I'll simply, under the ready function, add two lines of code that for every button in get tree, get nodes, and group skill buttons this time, we connect that button up, we connect the press function, we connect it to self, so it'll be this script, and we add it to a function, or we connect it to the function spend skill points. Now we want an extra variable to be added because we want to know which button that we actually press. Now when we have a look quickly at the node tree, when you have the texture rectangle right here, the texture rectangle's parent is the 1A, and of course we constantly are referencing things with the name of the node tree, so that 1A is important to us. So we're going to get the button, that will be the texture button, we're going to get the parent, that will be container 1A, and we're going to get the name, and that of course to every single button in their own reference point. Now, before we can add this to before this code actually works, we need to make sure we actually have that skill buttons group, because we don't have it yet. So we have to add all these texture buttons to a group. Now that's quite easy. We've done that before in this tutorial. We'll add skill buttons as the name. We'll add it. We'll manage the group. We'll make sure we get skill buttons selected. And we're going to look for all the texture buttons. And that should only be these skills available to us. So we got 1B, 2C, B, A, and 3A. And 1A is already there. We'll add them all to it. And now we got all our buttons connected to this script. And they'll add their skill name or their skill number into the spend skill points function. Now there's two things we basically have to do whenever the player presses a button. And first of all, we have to check, is this skill not already unlocked? Because if it's already unlocked, we don't want the player to accidentally spend skill points. And we also need to check if we have enough skill points to spend. So we do that right here under the spend skill points and then with the skill as input function. First we check if the player get skill underscore plus skill is true, then we pass. And else, if the player skill points is smaller than we check the data import skill tree data, we take the skill and we retrieve the cost. So now we go back into this JSON file and we retrieve the cost for how much the skill costs to unlock. Now, if that is smaller than the amount of skill points available to the player, we of course also don't want this function to run and we pass again. Else, in this case, this is where we need to code everything of how a player spends a skill point. Now you might be wondering, do we not have to check if a button is unlocked, yes or no? No, we don't, because the buttons or the skills that are unlocked still have their disabled function as true, or the disabled property for true. So a player would not even be able to press that button, so we never run into that situation and we don't have to filter those situations out. Now let's get on this code. This code is going to be quite long. It's about 50 lines of code to get all the tweens, to get all those bars to work properly and all the blooms and everything. But I'll try to digest it down in bite-sized pieces for you so you can follow along. So the first piece is the actual visual update onto the player in the character sheet that this skill has unlocked. Now to do that, we need to basically include two tweens. First of all, we need the tween from the halfway mark all the way up to the skill that's being unlocked. And then we want this skill to bloom up a little bit. So that's a second tween. And then of course, we need to remove that modulate, that grayish of the unlocked skill into a full colored image to make sure that the player has a visual feedback like, yes, I really unlocked the skill now. So that's sort of the elements we have to be working on. Now to work on those elements, there's one thing we need to add first, because in the first part, we have only added our tweens to the texture rectangle. That is the bloom, the radiant image in the background behind the skill images. We also need to add our tweens to the texture progresses because we need to tween those up as well. I forgot that in part 1, very sorry. So please make sure on every connector, every texture progress, you have a tween as well. So I've already added to all the other ones right here. Just this one, 3A, will do together. Now with that done, we can go to the script. Now I've already added the first script right here. So these are the two tweens, how to approach them, how to set them up, and how to start them. So we're going to go over it together. First, what I do is I define two variables, because else this tween get node right here will get very, very long. So basically these are just two helper variables to make sure that I can push the unlocking skill. That's right there, and the connector swim lane is right there. So the unlocking skill, we need that because we need to get the tween or the texture progress from, for example, 1A to 2A or 2B. So we need both skill names, and we have the skill name of the texture that was pressed. That's the skill that came in right there, but we also need the underlying skill. So to get that, we're going to get the unlocking skill, that is the data import. That's the skill tree. We take the skill and we retrieve the unlock skill, just like we did when we verified the requirements on the first part of this tutorial. Then the connector swim lane is basically the unlocking skill left 1, so that will be either 1, 2, or 3, plus the text 2, plus the skill, that's the skill being unlocked, left 1. What this does is our connectors are all in a container, in swimming containers, and these swimming containers are called 1 to 2 and 2 to 3. So in other words, the 1 is the first character of the unlocking skill, and the 2 is the first character in the name of the unlocked skill. So that's this unlocking skill left 1 and skill left 1, added with a 2 in between. So that's the connector swim lane we need to approach to get to the tween we want. And then the unlocking skill is required because in our container 1 to 2 we have the connectors from skill 1A to skill 2A and 2B. So to make that variable and to make sure you can push this code to any kind of node tree you set up with this kind of node structure, we can then now say variable tween1 is get node hbox container vbox container skills connectors. Then we're all the way up here. Then we have to get to our swimming lanes. That's our connector swim lane right there. Then we add a /. Then we go to our unlocking skill. So we go to, for example, 1A, and then / to the skill we actually want to unlock, for example, skill 2B, and then we want to get the tween. So that's tween number 1. Tween number 2 is going to be the radiant texture that's behind the actual skill icon. For that, we basically need to go to our skill container that was pressed. So if we take 2B again as an example, let's open 2B up here. We need to guess this tween right here that's going to be tweening that texture rectangle. So for that, we go to the hbox container vbox container skills tree plus the skill left character. So that is going to be getting us into this 2 swimming lane. Then / skill gets us into 2B, then / texture rectangle tween. So that's how we approach tween number 2. Now that we have both these tweens, we can set the tweens up. So for tween 1, all we want to do is it to go from the halfway all the way to the full unlocked way. Now we already know that the so what we do, let's go from the beginning, right? We take tween 1, we interpolate a property. We want to interpolate the property of the parent of this tween. That's why we add these tweens to all these different nodes, so we can just use get parent right here, so we always reference the correct box that we need to be tweening. We want to tween the value of the texture progress. We know it's at 50 because if the skill that we can click is unlocked and we can invest skill points in it, so it means we have the requirements. We've already set it to 50 in the first part of this tutorial. So we know it will start at 50 and we're going to tween it up to 75. Because the swimming lanes of the connectors are overlapping with the skill icons, we only need to tween up to 75 and from 25. So with that done, we can say that it happens in 1 second. And we're going to use a tween transcord tween ease out. Now, I've done more tweens in the past on my different tutorials, and I've always used tween translinear, and I think one time I used another one. Basically, there is a cheat sheet that I will post in the description of this box, so down below. It's a great resource to bookmark for your reference in the future. These are all the different tweens, including their different types. So a quart ease out is going to be starting real fast and will sort of finish very slowly. So you get a bar going up real fast and then slowly approaching to the end. So that's the tween we want. So this is the linear we've been using in most tutorials, and here you have a cheat sheet of what all the other tweens and combinations with their easings can result in and get the right feel for what exactly you want. So we're going to be using the quart ease out, the orange version right there. So I'll make sure that's in the description. So that's the quart ease out. Now for tween 2, we first want to gradient to blow up with skill, and then we wanted to go back down. So what we do is we get the tween to get parent. That's why it's so important to add these tweens to the right containers. You can just use get parent. We're going to set the rectangle skill. Now a control element doesn't have skill, it has a rectangle skill. So you got to make sure you push in rectangle underscore skill here. We know we start with a vector 1, 1. That's where we start off with. I'm going to be going up to vector 2.2. This might require something different for your particular skill tree. If you have a different display window, you got to fiddle around with the number a little bit. We're going to do that in 0.3 seconds, but we want to wait until the tween here has almost finished. So when this is starting to approach the end, we don't want it to start when this has ended, because it creates sort of a weird behavior. Again, that's fiddling around. So we're going to wait 0.7 seconds. So when this is still working for 0.3 seconds, and in that last bit of the curve, we're going to then start it up. Then that's going to take 0.3 seconds. So after that is finished, we're going to do exactly the same with tween 2, but now we're going to go back from 2.2 back to 1, 1. So it's going to be invisible. Again, 0.3 seconds, and now we wait 1 second. That's this 0.7 seconds plus the 0.3 seconds makes that this needs to wait for 1 second. Now with that done, we can start both these tweens up. What I do here, it's not going to be very noticeable, but it's important to first define all your tweens if they are dependent on each other. So tween number 2 is dependent on tween number 1 for the timing. And because of that, I first want to define everything, and then I start them up both at the same time. Now, once we got that, we can also make sure that something actually happens after that. So what we do is we yield the code for 1.3 seconds. And after that 1.3 seconds is over, we're going to take the texture button. Now the texture button is the texture button we're tweening right there. So we can approach that in almost exactly the same way as we got the tween. All we do is we cut off the / tween in the end right there. And then we're going to set that modulate, because remember, we grayed it out a little bit. So now we're going to set it to all the channels to be 100% with the 1 right there. Now with that all set, we should now be able to play the game. We should be able to see the skills, and now I should be able to unlock this skill right here. That looks pretty good. Thing is, we have not done anything in the code in the background. This is only a visual update. The skill is currently not unlocked on the player script. That variable skill underscore, that has not been set. So when I reopen the character sheet, the skill is locked again. Still, it's unlocked, it's clickable, but it's not spent yet. I can spend skill points on it again. So that's not what we want, and we also have not taken off any skill points from the number there. So let's now make sure that this updates in the code as well, in the background on all the variables, that we've actually spent some skill points, and that skill is now set true as it is really unlocked by the player in the tree. Alright, now these are probably the couple of easiest lines of this function. It's only a few things we have to do. First, we update the player skill to true. Simply we set player set. So instead of the get function we've been using several times, we now use the set function. It's going to be the skill underscore plus the skill, that whatever the button that was pressed, and we set it to true. For subtracting the skill points, we take the player skill points and we subtract with the minus symbol there. And then of course we go back into our data import, our skill tree, we retrieve the skill, and for that skill we retrieve the cost. So we go back into that JSON and retrieve the 3 or the 2 or the 2 there, whatever it is. Now with that done, of course, we also want to show that we spent some skill points on the actual label in the skill tree. So for that, we're going to go to the node skill points. Remember, that is the node skill points we've defined on the top here, and that we've already used here when we open up the skill character sheet. Now we again basically use exactly the same code, and as we have updated the player skill points one line above, when we now retrieve this again, we get the right value in the label. Now that's all good. What we want to do now is I'm going to change one of these skills. I'm going to set skill 2C to false, because that creates a new situation for us to play around with. That is going to be the next 20 lines of code that we're going to be needing on this script. Right now this skill is unlocked as I just set it to false. If I unlock it, I spent my skill points. We can see we now go from 9 to 7. Now, what we need to do is we need to do another check, because this skill should be unlocked at this point. We have the level requirement for that skill. but it's not pressable, it's not clickable, and our bar has not filled up the next 50%. So every time that we unlock a skill, we need to verify, is there a skill a level higher than this one? And do we meet the requirement for that? Should we unlock it? If yes, unlock it, fill up the skill connector to the 50% level, yada yada yada. So we're not done yet. We need to add like another 20 lines to get that last little piece in there. So let's work on that now. So I believe that if you have made it this far by now, you are ready to go a little bit quicker over this code probably, as this is a lot of repetition. It's just like, what little bits and pieces do you need exactly? So, you know, again, pause if necessary. Basically what we do at the start is we define a new empty array unlocked skills. The reason why we do that is because we can unlock more than one skill when we spend some skill points. Because when we spend some skill points on one skill, it's possible that that skill branches out at that point into two different skills. So it could be we need to unlock more than one skill, and that's not the case in this specific tutorial. I don't have that situation, but as I said, I'm going to make this code fully flexible for whatever you throw at it. So I also want to make sure that it's able to deal with that. So what we're going to do is we're going to iterate over every key in our database skill tree data. So every key is going to mean it's going to iterate from 1A all the way to 3A. And what it's going to do, it's going to verify if that key's unlock skill is equal to the skill. So let's take that example where when we press skill 2C, 3A should unlock. It's going to check 3A. Is going to check the unlock skill, that is 2C. And if 2C is equal to the skill, remember, that's the variable that we push into the script based on the button that was pressed, so the skill we unlocked, 2C. If that is the same, then we know, hey, there's potential chance that we need to unlock something. What we need to do now is verify if the player has enough level to unlock the next skill as well. So then, very similar to at the beginning of this tutorial, we check the player level, and if that's bigger or equal then, and then we retrieve the required player level from the database, the skill reference database, using the key. So for the specific key in this for loop that has been found, we're going to check what's the required player level, it's bigger, yes or no. If that's the case as well, we know that skill needs to be unlocked. So what we do, we first append that key to the unlocked skills array we had defined on the top there. Then what we need to do is we need to get to the tween of the texture progress bar. So we again define our connector swim lane, just like we defined the connector swim lane up there to get to that tween. Then we get that tween as in the get node hbox container, again using the connector swim lane, but also using the skill, the / and the actual key. Then we take that tween, we interpolate the property, we do pretty much exactly the same as before, but instead of going from 50 to 75, we now go from 25 to 50. We don't have to start at 0 because the texture progress overlaps a little bit with the texture and it starts at 25. In my case, because I went for exactly 100 and 200 pixels. We again use the transquart ease out function like we did for the other one, and we're going to start the tween. So if you have two skills unlocking, it will iterate in this loop. It will both start the tweens. The tweens could start a millisecond apart from each other. That's just how this code works. Player will probably not recognize that. Then, when all the tweens are started that need to start, probably maximum 2, we're going to go that if not unlocked skills is empty. So if the unlocked skills array is not empty, this way we're not going to run this code if there's nothing to unlock. Could be that it's the end of the tree. It could also be that whatever skill is above the skill that was unlocked, you don't meet the level requirement for yet. So it will only run over this code if there was actually something to do. So for that case, if it was not empty, in other words, we are unlocking something, we're going to yield the code for 1 second, and that is to let this tween finish, this 1 second of that tween. Then once that is finished, we're going to go over every single key in that unlocked skills. So that could be 1 skill or 2 skills or possibly even 3 or 4 skills if you're really branching out in your tree. We're going to approach the texture button, that is the actual button of the skill. And of course, we're going to approach that very similar to the beginning of the tutorial. We're going to set disable to false, and we set modulate to 40% in the red, green, and blue, and 100% in the transparent. So this last 2 lines of code, or actually this whole piece of code right here. It's very similar to the load skills function we made at the beginning, where we also approach the texture button. We set it disable to false and set modulate to color 0.4.4.4. So with that little last piece added in here, we can now again play the game, and we can do our last test to see if everything works. So we can open our character sheet. We can see that now if we unlock this skill, it blooms up and it opens up towards the next skill, and now this one is unlockable, and now we can unlock that one too. However, if we can also unlock this one, we still have enough skill points for that, but now we have 0 and we don't have enough level. So if we were to go and kill our skeletons to really finish this demonstration all off, we can now go, and now this one is unlocked. We got 4 new skill points as we programmed in the player script, and we can unlock our last skill, completing our skill tree. Now to really finish this off, final finish off, we of course have to set, because that's how we, or at least that's how I want it to work, we're gonna hide the skills, we're gonna show the stats so that the game opens up with the stats screen first, as that's the usual. Not sure why that's how it worked. I guess in old school RPGs, and everybody just kept on copying. The stats open up first, and we can use our skills button right here to go to the skill tree. So now that's all functional. You got a fully integrated skill tree in your character sheet. Now, I got some plans for the next tutorial, and I'm very curious about your opinion, so keep watching for a couple of seconds and let me know in the opinion, or in the comments down below what you think. Last but not least, I'm very curious for your opinion what we should do more with this skill tree. There's 2 things that I can think of, but I'm curious what you think is more important to work on, what you would like to see, and maybe you got another idea yourself. The 2 things that I think of is that in many games you can keep on investing skill points in a single skill, increasing its level from maybe level 1 to 20. I mean, the most obvious example for a system like that is something like Diablo 2. What we could also do is that maybe this character is a combination of 3 classes, or maybe that specific class, maybe Knight, has 3 different skill tabs. What we could also do is add a tab container or something like that, and include 3 different skill trees, and how you can adjust your code to make sure that it doesn't mix up any skills from one skill tree to the next whenever you change from tab to tab. Now that's also something that's probably very much a viable thing that many of you are looking for. So I'm curious, let me know in the comments down below what you would like to see first, what you think is important, or maybe if you got a 3rd or 4th feature of this skill tree that you would like to see. So leave a comment down below, let me know. That was it for today, guys. I hope you like it. If you did, smash that like button, hit subscribe. Don't forget that little bell icon to make sure that you don't miss out on the next video. As always, I also live stream my own game development sessions on Twitch every Tuesday and Thursday. There's usually a big group of Godot developers in the chat there, all watching, learning, and coding with me together on a title called Soul Whisper. I hope to see you there one day, or I hope to see you in the next tutorial. Until then, keep on gaming, keep on coding. See you later, guys.